Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe. In today's video, we're going to be analyzing the nonverbal communication of Kanye West and his new wife, Bianca Censori, at their most recent fiasco at the 2025 Grammys. More on that in just a second. Let's go ahead and roll the intro first. Okay, so as I mentioned, this video is going to be centered around West and his wife Censori at their most recent event at the Grammys in 2025. That's right, in breaking news across the globe, roughly 8 billion people have been trying a timeless and life-changing product. It's become shockingly pervasive. While this could be very alarming, really, it's quite fine. We all need air, but what isn't really as necessary is that people are wanting more and more from the air that they have these days. People are mixing all sorts of stuff with their air, smoke, vapor, other stuff. Even though mixing stuff with your air isn't always bad, there are also things that you can put in your air that make it feel like if you don't get those things that are in your air, you will in fact die. But the plot twist is that those things are often the very things that are going to kill you. Despite air being so good for doing alive things, people have been trying to mix chemicals, nicotine, and toxins that greatly increase the possibility of you doing not very alive things much more quickly than if you hadn't. What's even worse is that these not so good things can be very habit forming. It's a vicious cycle, a cycle that today's sponsor, Fume, has stepped in to help out with. Say you are craving a really good air, but you want that air to have a little extra kick. Instead of using air that makes bad habits and can hurt you, you can use a fume that makes delicious air that will only benefit you. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device that draws flavor to your mouth, not directly to your lungs. This way, you can get fun air and satisfy any of your oral fixations with non-toxic flavors. Since it's free from smoke, nicotine, or vapor, in fact, it's really only just air, it's safe to use that air anywhere. Say you're going on a vacation and you are starting to feel really stressed that the air at the new location won't be nearly as fun as the air at your current location. Scary, right? Well, to help with that anxiety, Fume devices also have a delightfully satisfying fidget feature that will be sure to help calm those severely frayed vacation nerves. Phew. Now, since I was born without the ability to smell, I'm pretty specific with which Fume cores I personally actually use. My personal favorite is the crisp mint. Even with my subdued sense of taste, it still tastes refreshing and energizing, so that's the one that I appreciate. Some other interesting favorites of my friends and families that I have asked is the maple pepper flavor, the white cranberry flavor, and also one that's called cinnamon hearts. You should personally probably try to see if it's something that fits into your life as well. Fume has already helped over 300,000 people build better habits. So try Fume today, and if you order the Journey Pack now using my code, which is Observe, that's OBSERVE, you'll get a free Fume topper, an awesome accessory to level up your experience as well. Go to tryfume.com/observe or scan the QR code that's here on the screen. Thank you again to Fume for sponsoring this video. And now that we have finished this breaking news, back to your regularly scheduled program. Woo-wee, with all of that breaking news out of the way, time to continue. The 2025 Grammys are in fact done, and there was certainly a fair amount of drama within the celebrations. From Beyonce winning Album of the Year with her country album to feuding artists seemingly making up, this event was far from uneventful. However, perhaps the most talked about incident this year came from none other than Kanye West and his wife Bianca Censori. For those of you who are not maybe aware as to what's going on, West and Censori made an appearance on the red carpets that certainly sparked a massive amount of controversy across the media. There's a short video. Like I said, it's pretty darn short. We'll go ahead and watch it real quick here, and then I'll continue on after that. So as I'm sure you can understand, people's reaction to this publicity stunt are as expected. Many are concerned, many are outraged, still others are simply here for the proverbial tea, but it seems as if everyone has questions for and about the duo. Whose idea was this? Why did they leave right after the carpet? And what was the plan with all of this in general? However, the most prevalent question that seems to be plaguing people is Bianca Censori okay? And was she forced to do this? While I will be analyzing their nonverbal communication to unearth what is going on in the actual clip itself, I also wanted to do some digging on West and Censori first to help me gather some behavioral information, nonverbal patterns, and psychological disposition prior to this fiasco. I did this to better establish their nonverbal baselines, gather context from life experiences, and to take into consideration what people who know them have said to them and about them in general. A combination of these extra sources of data will help ensure a more accurate nonverbal read by being able to rely on their specific body language and psychological idiosyncrasies rather than the general limited universals of nonverbal communication. Now, from West's side of things, I was able to find a long-standing pattern of severe attention-seeking behavior. Earlier in his career, the most reliable method of achieving the attention he so desperately craved was hard work. Through his hard work, he began to achieve a level of recognition. However, it became obvious that simply being recognized for hard work was not what drove West at his core, and he began to escalate his problematic behavior even further. From award show scandals and paparazzi run-ins to overt racism and cherry-picked religious mantras, West continued to find the attention that he feverishly was pursuing through the mechanism of controversy. Throughout the entirety of his public life, West has been defined by a frantic and insatiable compulsion for attention, be it positive or seemingly negative. He has a tendency to react to situations that he feels out of control in with anger, which then can escalate to illogical rage given specific environmental factors. Along with this, I have found that he has an anticipatable pattern of egotistical behaviors, oftentimes elevating his own self-worth well beyond the limitations of actual reality. And while he has an overtly expressed distaste for the general media, he does also repeatedly return to it as a source of the attention that he feels he deserves and honestly needs. Now, on the flip side of this behavioral coin, we have Censori. Censori's depth of behavior online is not nearly as deep as West's, which comes as no surprise considering that Censori was only 8 when Kanye released his first official debut single, Through the Wire, in 2003. Bianca is one of 3 Censori children raised by parents Alexandra and Leo. While not much is known of Alexandra, Leo has a criminal history and is brother to a well-known Australian gangster once dubbed Melbourne's Al Capone. The Censori family, however, has made it quite clear that they are not interested in weighing in on the reports about Bianca and have kept any commentary on her and West's relationship minimal. Now, Bianca's earlier life could be characterized as seemingly average. Her classmates described her as pretty, intelligent, and kind, saying that she would give everyone, no matter what, the time of day and never gave off what people would call the mean girl energy. She graduated from the University of Melbourne in 2017 with a Bachelor's of Architecture and then returned later to receive her Master's in Architecture in 2020. From what little can be found of her online activities before becoming entangled with West, her behaviors were creative, but largely uneventful in the sphere of media drama. She was seemingly focused on her professional career, consisting of being an architectural designer, a model, and also an entrepreneur. She maintained an average set of behavioral patterns until her entanglement with West began and things shifted from there. Since their private marriage, West and Censori have been responsible for multiple voyeuristic acts in the public, not the least of which was the most recent event at the Grammys. Viewers have noted that West's seeming decline into addiction and a lull in media attention for him could be indicative of him spiraling into increasingly problematic behavior, especially if he has plans to release new music, which oftentimes coincides. This, coupled with the stark behavioral and physical changes from Censori, have many concerned about her well-being. As I looked into the history of West's and Censori's various relationships in the past, I quickly found that there was, not surprisingly, little known about Censori's past. However, as I dug into West's past, I did find that he had a tendency to be controlling in multiple ways to his partners. Example of this behavior include overt control of what his partner's wardrobe could be, what they would be allowed to wear, utilizing his partners as a method of garnering public attention for himself, not the least of which would be another example here at the Grammys, and then using his partner's status, whatever it was, to further elevate his own. He has also been shown to attempt to compensate for these problematic behaviors by performing very overt displays of affection, again, oftentimes in view of the public, garnering more attention for himself as well. While much of the historical evidence pushes for concern when attempting to do analysis such as this, it's also pretty important to try to check biases at the door. My initial response to this footage was overall immediately negative. I didn't like it. However, I don't want that immediate distaste to lead to missed cues that don't support anything other than my idea or my feeling. With this in mind, and with the research I was able to do on West and Censori, we can now start analyzing the video we watched from the 2025 Grammys a second ago. Before we do, however, I do just want to remind everyone who is watching this video that this is only my educated opinion. I created it for entertainment and educational purposes exclusively, and it should not be used in any way as legal or professional evidence. Now that we've had the disclaimers out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the actual footage itself. I'm gonna go ahead and pause here just to get an initial setting for everything, and already there's some things happening. So what I want to start noting immediately about their nonverbal communication is who is in charge in this situation, and it is West. If you watch how they're interacting, it becomes quite clear. So where it starts to highlight most in this specific first section is how they're holding hands. Obviously, especially if you're here on this channel, you know that nonverbal communication is not black and white. There's a lot of gray. So there are some loose interpretations of holding hands. However, mechanically speaking, if a person's going to take lead and walk in front ever, or just take charge of the direction of walking, they will most of the time walk with their hand back facing forward, palm facing back. And as you can see, that is how Kanye is holding hands with Bianca. So that does make sense here that he is guiding this situation here, as he's the one in charge of this. And what really also sends it even further is at the very beginning, you could see him, as he's holding hands, he's holding her hand fairly tightly, and you could see him flex his wrist there at the very, very beginning. And this is a dominating behavior as well. Holding hands doesn't need to have that wrist flex in there. It's a change in roles from just a passive hand in front to now I'm controlling. To be able to have a little bit of context for that and a little bit of a contrast, this is what their hands look like when they're not in some sort of stressful behavior. You could see that they're quite relaxed when they're holding hands. It's still interlaced fingers, but the difference is that strain that Kanye has at the very, very beginning of the clip, letting us know he's the one in charge of this, at least so far. Let's continue. All right, gonna go ahead and pause here. So now, as you can see, there's a few things that I want to talk about, both non-verbally and then just in general. First, in general, I have added a couple different angles of this event so that we can see as much nonverbal communication as we can from all the different angles that we can. Fortunately, all of it's fairly high resolution, so we're able to work with a fair amount of information. Along with that, I was able to take the most publicized lip reading experts' analysis of their faces during this, and I was able to overlay the text as to what they said they were saying. Some of it, from what I can see, it doesn't seem to fully line up, but it is pretty close, so I did my best that I could to get what they had seen and put it in there. And we'll talk about some of the nonverbal communication that goes along with what they also state in their lip reading. Something that I want to note nonverbally with this is that when they turn to face the cameras after they've walked into their position on the red carpet, you see Kanye take a step forward. He wants to be towards the cameras, he wants the attention, he wants the pictures, it makes sense. And you see Bianca from behind pull him back. That's what causes Kanye to turn. And when Kanye turns, this is where he'll start talking and they start having an interaction. To me, this indicates a level of perhaps insecurity, wanting him to be closer to her at this point. The big reveal has not happened. Things have not gotten complex yet, so perhaps there's a level of that insecurity and lack of performativism that has come in so far from Bianca. It's letting us know a little bit. She might be feeling a little bit nervous. Kanye's there for the attention. So now we're going to start looking at how they respond to each other during this time here. All right, I got to pause here because there's a lot that as they're interacting as we're going through here. So he says something along the "you're making a scene now" or "you're going to make a scene," something along those lines according to Hickling. And then her immediate response to that is a small movement no, and then to do an adjustment of her clothing. Now, because she's adjusting her clothing at that moment there where he leans in to talk, it does support the concept that he is mentioning something about her clothing to her there, which would make sense contextually with what's about to happen. She pulls it in around herself. This could be a lack of security. She could be feeling quite nervous in here or insecure in this area, causing her to do that. There could also be an indicator of self-preening as well, as she's just hyper aware of what everybody's thinking about her or perceiving her as. And then it could also be partially a postural change as well, as there could be a prep for a role change coming in there as well. Kanye saying, "let's start making a scene," her initial response to that is a no shake. To me, that seems suspicious, especially with the other insecurity gestures going in there as well. It makes me feel uncomfortable, especially considering that he seems to be heading this up. He's the one that's calling the shots. Okay, now let's do this. Now you do this. Now you do this. And so far, her nonverbal communication hasn't been really pushing towards them being on the same page, but more so of him being in control and her doing what she's told. Let's continue watching this. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pause there. So you can see on the left side of the screen as she's responding to Kanye, you can again see her do a little no shake in there. Then she does a smile, which does not reach her eyes, which lets us know that that's not a genuine smile. It's not built out of happiness. It is a forced smile. Now, it could be a nervous smile. It could be a polite smile. Regardless, the defining factor of it is its insincerity. She's not happy in this specific scenario. And what I find fascinating about her eyes, which we will talk about a little bit more, is how wide they are. They're fairly widened in this entirety of this interaction here. What I also want to make note of is here at the end where they now have gone through, they've said their things, and they're starting to do their scenario here. Right before she settles into her modeling mode, which you can kind of see, she does some shrugs in there to get ready, and you'll see that more as it plays out here. As she settles into her modeling mode, you see just a very brief glimpse of perhaps sadness across the upper half of her face and her eyes as she's trying to get set into doing this risque thing, to say the least, of which she's really the only one being vulnerable. Again, this isn't Kanye being vulnerable, it's only her, which this does fit in with what Kanye has done in the past with his behavioral patterns, especially in his relationships, of using his partner in order to get attention for himself in some way or another. So we're about to see how this plays out here. They've had their little interactions here. She's starting to shift into her modeling mode. Let's watch it. Gonna go ahead and pause here. So something that has been made note of in the rest of the media is that Kanye is not looking at Bianca during this entire time. There's a whole bunch of theories as to why that is. To me, what seems to be the most prevalent in this is that Kanye's focus isn't really on Bianca. That's not the point of this. I don't think that Bianca has the value in Kanye's eyes at this point. What he's focused on are the pictures, what the media's getting, what they're taking in, and what he's presenting to them. So he's not going to check in often with her because frankly, I don't think he's focused on that. She's also not checking in on him regularly, which can be seen as something that can come as a relief. If this was something that was fully forced, perhaps you might be able to anticipate seeing Censori doing more check-ins, nervous check-ins with Kanye. They don't exist here, which lets us know that at very least there's some level of individualism within this stunt. However, everything else that we've seen kind of sprinkled about it is not pushing me to believe that Censori came up with this idea or is even really comfortable with this idea. It seems to be something that Kanye did, that Kanye orchestrated, that he's still trying to orchestrate even at this point in the video, and that's been the whole focus of it, is Kanye, which makes sense also historically with that context as well. Let's keep watching this. All right, gonna go ahead and pause here. So they're standing next to each other, and now you start seeing more evidence of this being Kanye's concept, his control, his planning. As they're standing there, she has now revealed herself to the public, and Kanye is gesturing for somebody to come in and grab a coat. This is something that's prompted by Kanye, letting us know that this is his controlled situation. Also, he's not really one to relinquish control to anybody. It does make sense contextually. Then, as they're standing there, pictures are happening, you see him gesture down in front of her as he's telling her to now, okay, let's step forward. And so they step forward, per his bidding again, and he starts to do this thing where he steps off to the side. As he steps off to the side, you see him fall into what is either called the at ease stance or the regal stance. It's where your hands are clasped like that behind your back. Now, this has a long history, not the least of which is in the military, but what it conveys non-verbally is fascinating. Since hands are behind the back and head is elevated, it's revealing all of the vulnerable areas of your body. It shows an overt amount of confidence that there's no risk here. There's not something that's going to be attacking Kanye as he's showing non-verbally. However, that also being said, with the hands behind the back, it also indicates a level of respect. That's why you see it so commonly in the military. It's a showing of both respect and confidence, which makes sense contextually. You can also see the respect of this in, you could say, like museums or art galleries, something along those lines. You'll see these sorts of, I don't want to touch with my hands, so they're behind my back, I'm being respectful. He starts to do that, but what I find more telling in this is what he does with his face here in a second, so we'll continue watching. All right, and so that's it there. What you see from him is he does a smile, and then he does what's called a tongue jut. So the tongue jut is usually centered around the mischievousness, this feeling of you got caught out in something that you weren't supposed to do, or you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, and you're feeling cheeky about it, and that tongue jut comes out there. So we see him do that there, which lets us know that he's doing something that he knows he probably shouldn't be doing, and that he's probably getting away with it. We're seeing this non-verbal surrounding, adding a lot of clarity as to what the mindset behind this will be. But let's continue on through this, and as we do, I'll also talk about some of the stuff that I noticed from Bianca, which is a little bit more troubling. So let's keep watching. Here! All right, so there were a number of things that happened throughout that, not the least of which I showed you as it's playing through the overlay of the album cover that they were trying to do. That also has, I feel, a decent amount as to the positioning of the two of them as all of these photos are being taken, is that Kanye's most recent albums have not been performing as well, so it would make sense that he would try to do a stunt to try to boost those, especially if he wants to release more music, and rumors have been spread about that he might be. Any of the positioning that they're doing in that outside of what we've already talked about, more likely to be attributed towards just trying to set up for that stunt itself. But now what I want to also talk about is he obviously is, again, the person to tell Censori that it's now time to move to the next spot. You can see him gesture with his head, and then you see him take another dominating hand grab there. This one's very obvious as he's very much in the lead and almost has to grab behind. Again, a lot of tension in the wrist, letting us know that there's a fair amount of muscle activation in that, which is more controlling, a little bit more firm and stern of a hand grab, giving us more dynamics. But what I do want to point out, which is just more upsetting to me, are the expressions that Censori has throughout this. You see, she obviously at the very beginning settles into her modeling mode. That can make things more difficult, but with her modeling mode, that means that she's going to be more comfortable with cameras. She won't be as likely to be afraid of them or like trying to hide from them. It could also mean that since she has that experience in modeling, that she'll be able to kind of block out distractions and work on her poses and her looks as she's going through and having her picture being taken. So there are factors that go into that. However, as I went through her past, I went to look at her facial expressions during her modeling to see, because models will oftentimes fall into a set of facial expressions where they know they look the most attractive or sensual. However they're trying to present themselves, they have their expression set. I'd spent hours looking through her modeling photos to try to find as many examples of her face and eyes as I could, and I'll start flashing them up here. As you can see throughout her modeling career, her eyes especially have a specifically hooded expression. The lids are relaxed and the facial features themselves come across as overall relaxed, especially in the glabella area here, and then also across her eyebrows and then her eyes themselves. All of that comes across as rather relaxed. Then when you come to this instance here, what struck me as uncomfortable is the fear that is present in the upper half of her face during this instance. You could see the state of her eyebrows and her eyes are different. The relaxation is different. The setting of them is different, and it's more characterized by fear. You can see the ever so slightly upwards turning of the interior of her eyebrows here in the glabella, and you can see the widening of her eyes as well. Both of those pushing me towards fear rather than towards confidence or control or collection or comfort or any of those emotional states that you would kind of hope she would be able to be in a relationship that she's in, but instead it's characterized by these negative emotions. It's complicated for sure to be able to look at and make note of. It's not great. Let's continue. Something else that just makes me overtly uncomfortable for her and makes me sad for her is you can see around the bottom of her dress as she's trying to, honestly, it seems as though do everything she can to probably cover up as she's pulling her dress down some. Obviously, the garment itself is doing nothing to cover her, but that doesn't stop her subconscious from wanting to have that safety and coverage. As you could start to see that coming around. Even while they're walking, you could see her just fidgeting with her dress, trying to make herself feel more comfortable. And those self-soothers, those attempts to cover back up, those preening gestures, all to me indicate that she's feeling highly uncomfortable in this area. She's hyper aware that everybody is obviously looking at her. This has to be a pretty difficult to maintain or stomach moment as a 29-year-old human being who did not grow up with this level of fame. It has to be difficult for her. So seeing these sorts of subtle tells, yes, her face maintains her acting pose, albeit laced with fear, but the rest of her nonverbal communication is really starting to show a different story outside of that, which is far more unfortunate. There's only 15 seconds left of this. Let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll talk at the end. There again, Censori does not smile at the end, despite the heckling photographer being like, oh, let's see that smile. But Kanye does again, and not only does Kanye smile, he also does another tongue jut there at the end, letting us know that he has just pulled off a publicity stunt that did not in any way sacrifice his own vulnerability. he pulled off something that got him more attention, and that was not a positive thing. There were minors present at this event. It was a very not okay publicity stunt to do in general, let alone with kids present. But he knows that he just got away with it, and now the internet is all talking about him again, and many sources have been saying that he is a master at keeping himself in front of the media at all costs, and that seems to be yet again another situation. If we're just looking at what I saw non-verbally speaking here, Kanye's in control. He showed no evidence of anxiety, of fear, of any form of uncertainty. He seemed very confident and very in control, if not controlling, throughout the entirety of it. On the opposite side of that, Bianca Censori seemed to be much more timid. She had forced smiles. She had moments where it seemed as though she might disagree with what Kanye had said, albeit minimal. She has fear prevalent even through her acting mode, her look that she has and falls into. She has manipulators as she tries and attempts to cover herself. All of this seems to be extremely and overtly compromising to Censori while not at all being compromising to West. And this falls in line perfectly with West's history. Some other things that I want to make note of that are fascinating and, again, troubling with this relationship is that West's prior relationship, especially with Kim Kardashian, was centered around he was on his fake I'm a godly man walk thing that he was doing and trying to tout all of the Christian values that go with that, with the modesty and all of these things, which Kim was pushing back against. But his whole mantra was jealousy. They can't be viewed, they being the partner. It was very his. He's very possessive, very controlling. And now it comes around to Bianca, who's very young and is likely able to be much more manipulated because of that. Despite her intelligence and her own capabilities as a person, he is still a much older and much more powerful being than she is. So there is still likely that level of disproportionate control that goes into that. Her style, her visual appearance has changed dramatically since becoming entangled with Kanye West. It has also shifted specifically, not just in general, but specifically into making her look more and more like a Kardashian, which is fascinating. And then all of these publicity stunts that they have done where it's very voyeuristic, it's centered around sensual or sexual practices in public settings and public indecencies on all sorts of different levels. All of these are flying in antithesis to what Kanye did with Kim, which lets me then know that everything that he seems to be doing with Bianca is pointed at Kim. To me, that kind of just indicates that Kanye's not anywhere close to being over Kim, and that it's a really, really, really terrible position for Bianca to be in, to not only be much younger, power level difference and dynamics, everything like that, but then also being asked to change more or less into the ex of the partner that they're now with. And then everything that their partner is doing is centered around seemingly jabbing at the ex. Still not okay. From what I saw non-verbally here, it does not seem as though she's in control. And also with this most recent event at the Grammys, it also doesn't seem as though she's very safe. But let me know what you think in the comments of this video. I do know that this has been largely divisive online. So if you have a different opinion than I do, please let me know what that opinion is and why in the comments of this video. Perhaps there's just something that I've missed, and anything that I can do to add clarity to that. I would rather, if I have an opinion on something, I want it to be, I would like it to be truthful. So if I've missed something or anything like that, please just let me know. I deeply, deeply hope that Bianca can find community that is there for her and is ready to support her, and it not be about publicity and it not be about, oh, you know, Kanye or blah, 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 whatever like that, but is really there for her, because I think that's probably what she's gonna need here, especially after an instance like this. Regardless, thank you for watching this video. Please go check out Fume if you haven't already. It's a very cool brand. I greatly appreciate them, and they've helped support the channel, and if you would like to help support the channel too, that's a good way of being able to do that. But without further ado, that's all that I've got for the day. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome as you always are, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.